We can go. Hey, good afternoon, Dee. My name is Collin Ice. I'm welcoming you here to interview with us again on the series, collecting these great memories of Braniff's famed history. Can we start off with something simple? Give me your name and maybe what were some of your positions and time served with Braniff?
Well, I flew from 1966 until 1982. And when I was looking at my records, I noticed that I graduated on May 12th, 1966, and Braniff went out of business on May 12th, 1982. So it was definitely an exact 16-year tenure. I flew out of 10 years out of Dallas, domestically, and then the last 4 years I flew London, Paris, Frankfurt. I flew an inaugural flight to Amsterdam and also Honolulu quite often. And that was for the last 4 years, I flew exclusively the 747, and those were my routes.
Wow.
So I transferred, I changed back from London to Honolulu. So when I was grounded, it took me several months to try to get my whole body clock back on track, because I was going, from halfway around the world with my time clock. So
you definitely started in the jet set. I mean, you were smack in the middle of the jet set era.
Yes, but my first flight, that said, my first flight, I went out to the airport, and I was on call. I was on reserve. When you first start out at that time, you were on call, and we never knew where we were going to be flying. So I was called out, and I was assigned to a flight that was an all-night flight, puddle jumper, all the way to Denver and back to Dallas, through Oklahoma City, probably Amarillo. I can't remember all the different stuff, but it was an all-night flight. The first leg of my first trip, and it was only one flight attendant was working the trip. So I got on the plane, and I, of course, went right up to the cockpit and introduced myself to the crew. And I said, "This is my first flight." And I think I got a little bit of an eye roll from the crew, saying, "Oh God, here we go." And then I went back, and I brought them beverages, and then I went back and tended to my preparation, and I had the first leg was from Dallas to Oklahoma City, and I believe it was even less than an hour, or about an hour, because I was flying on a Convair, which was a prop airplane. So welcome to the jet age, right? So I get on this airplane, and so I had to do my own setups. I had to do my own announcements. I had to do my own preparation, my own delivering of the meals and things. So I thought it would be really clever to hand out the pillows, because we didn't have tray tables on the Convair. So when people got their dinner, they had to put their dinner on a pillow on their lap. So I thought it would be really clever to hand out the pillows before takeoff. And I thought, well, that's even an added safety feature where, they've already just put their head in their pillows if they have to get in the brace position, just fresh out of training. What can I say? So I'd gotten all the drink orders before. I had those all prepared, fix those before takeoff, ran those out, and then served the meals, hot meal, and with our 12 by 18-inch trays. They were big trays in those days, and china plates, and the whole thing. So got them all served, got everything pulled back in, and stowed in the galley. And after we landed, I kind of collapsed. I thought, wow, shoot, I did it. And then I forgot that, and then all the passengers were standing in the aisle. I thought, oh, I'm supposed to be at the front of the airplane, because we didn't have jetways at that time. So they had to. There was a staircase in the door of the airplane. It was my job to be at the front of the airplane to let the stairs out and the door open, so that the passengers get off the airplane. So I'm tripping over, excuse me, I'm so sorry. So I'm tripping over them and got up to the front, and the captain was standing there with the door. You know, he had put the stairs down, let open the door, and I said, "Oh, Captain, I'm so," you know, he said, "It's all right, honey." You know, I'm sure I got another eye roll, but that was my first experience on Braniff. So I didn't have anyone taking me by the hand and say, "This is how we do this." I had to kind of start, you know, from scratch, all by myself on my first place.
What a
That was my
wonderful,
introduction.
what a wonderful first story. Was that by chance your first flight ever? Or had,
Yes.
wow.
No, that was my first flight. Well, I mean, I had flown, you know,
Okay,
as a
but that was
passenger,
where, yeah, I was curious.
but that was my first flight ever. Yes.
Where do you remember your first flight as a passenger? Just, did you have an
I
aviation bug
do.
in
I
you?
do. I had an aspiration where I wanted to be a flight attendant from about the age of 11 or 12.
Wow.
And I had saved up my money. I was doing babysitting at the time, and I'd saved up my money. And in the summer times, I lived in Wisconsin, and my grandparents lived in Minnesota. So I would go up to Minneapolis every summer to get away from the tribe that was at home. And so I got up there. So I was flying back. I decided I was going to buy a ticket on an airplane and fly from Minneapolis to Milwaukee.
Yep.
And it was on Northwest. And I had even gotten a suit. It was a Navy suit where I had a polka dot collar and everything, wore my gloves and everything. And I got on the airplane, and I was flying. I was 12 years old, and I was all by myself. My grandmother introduced me to the crew, which they were fabulous, took me by the hand, and I got to sit right back by the stewardesses. You know, I was so excited. And from that day forward, I thought, this is what I want to do.
That's
So
amazing. That's when your
that, you
aviation
know, it took me, 9 years? I was 12 and I started flying when I was about 21.
Well, when you came, was Braniff one of the first choices, or was that your only
I
choice?
had no, I had flown, I had applied to United because
Okay.
I'm from southern Wisconsin. And my dad was an architect and
Oh,
would belong to the AIA in Chicago.
yeah.
So we were going back and forth to Chicago a lot. So when I'd go into Chicago, I put an application to United, I think TWA, every airline I could, never got hired. But then before I started actually flying, I was living in Minneapolis and working at Bell Telephone in the engineering department, doing tracing work. And I was in the Bell Telephone choir, and I did tours around the company. And I thought it's time to apply again. So I went out to the airport, and I met Reba J, who was the Braniff manager at the hostess base out there. And I stopped in there and I said I wanted to apply. So I had an interview, I mean, before I had even filled out an application. And I even have my application that I still have a copy of my application that I found when I was digging through all my stuff.
Would love to see that.
And so she recommended me, and I was hired, and went, flew down to Dallas and had, further interviews, of course, and went on from there. So
Wow.
so I mean, it was magical. It was
From the
and I
time,
was so attracted to Braniff because of the uniforms. I mean, it was like, I want to be a part of this because coming from an architectural family, my mother was an interior designer. I was always really interested in exactly. So the design, the uniforms, and everything else. This was not your military uniform airline,
no,
and so I had to go.
that's so you're so spot on with that definition and that description. I
Yes,
love that you have an architecture a part of you as well, because Braniff was not only fashion forward, their architecture of their facilities,
I know.
their cooperation with Gerard, to bring in not only the physical buildings, but Calder, etc., but the furniture and the lounges.
Oh, I mean, it was brilliant.
Your father and family
I
had to.
mean, you just couldn't turn your what. And my parents were enthralled with it too. I mean,
Of course.
they took every travel they could, and took advantage of a lot of the passes and did a lot more traveling sometimes than I did, even
Tell me
as
about
far as leisure.
tell me about when you started. You got where did you do your training? Let's go there.
Well, interestingly, I'm coming down to Dallas for the show, and
I'll see you there.
I hope so. And so I was trying to find a place to stay, and I looked at the hotel that was recommended by the website. I thought that looked familiar. That's actually the
It's
building where Braniff had our training. I stayed there.
I love it.
And when I talked to the hotel when I made my reservation, I said, "Did Braniff used to have the college here?" And they said, "Yes, this is the same building."
Yeah.
So I'm staying there. I am so excited. I'm beside myself.
I'm excited too. I'll be happy to meet with you. Our friend, very, very close friend, is the hotel manager.
Oh,
So,
cool. I've worked in hotels. I've
okay.
done a lot of I've done a lot of event planning and group work. I worked with a motorsports marketing company where I did at track events for Caterpillar and other companies that were sponsors on race cars. And I went to all the tracks around the country and set up banners and stuff all around the country, and have a couple pictures if you want to take
You
the
have a
time. But
great story.
I have a million stories, but and a lot of that is due to Braniff's, the training I got with Braniff, and the ability to interact with all different types of people and walks of life. It was really the training was invaluable,
That's
and
actually,
so I was able to transition, not easily, when I first moved out to, and I had to sell my house, and I decided I really wasn't a Texan, that I really felt like I wanted to be near the water. And so I sold my house and decided to move to the Bay Area, to Marin County. And so sold my house, and that was what funded me. But I go on interviews right after when I first started applying for jobs. Well, that's very nice that you ran trays, but can you type? So, and I could, but I thought, you can't even give me credit for all these years of experience that I've had. It was really disheartening, I
well,
must say.
some of those customers that you worked with, I'm sure at some point along the way, were definitely challenging, and I bet some of them were celebrities.
Oh,
Did you
they were,
did you
yes.
run across any
Oh, of
celebrities?
course I did. I had Bing Crosby on a flight. He sat in 1C, and kind of did his little kind of whistle, kind of humming routine, and had that kind of sly look in his eyes. And so I had him. I had Imelda Marcos on. She sat in the front row of the 747. I don't remember the years or anything, but I
Yeah.
had her on the flight. But and a lot of sports guys, a lot of sports teams, a lot of I had Dorothy Malone on a flight one time. I don't know if you remember her. She was a
Of
very,
course.
a
We're
soap
actually
actress.
Yes,
Yeah.
we're actually going to be she did some filming for Braniff, and
I thought I saw her name, but I had her on a flight. Yeah.
we're actually going to be doing an evening with Dorothy Malone film tribute at the
Cool.
Frontiers of Flight Museum, which is very much next to your hotel where you're staying. It's
Oh,
not during the
cool.
conference, but at some
Yeah.
point I'll get you information on that. But it's
Oh,
great that
that would
you
be
had her.
awesome. Yeah. So I had her, but my favorite one was right after Jimmy Carter left the White House. And I think about their first commercial flight after he left office. They flew from Dallas to Hawaii, and he and Rosalind were seated in first class. The Secret Service took over the business section on the 747. I was working coach, and I was working in the galley, which is kind of I loved kind of directing the show. So I loved galley. And so when I wasn't first class, when I was first class, I had a lot of fun interacting up there. But I was working coach, and he and Rosalind left their seats and introduced themselves and shook hands with every single passenger, 400 plus passengers on the 747, all through the coach cabin. And they even came into my galley and chatted with me for a few minutes. That was, I'll never forget it. I was so, and Rosalind had kind of tears in her eyes. You could see that, it was a difficult, position that they were in, but totally gracious and charming. And I never saw any other politician or VIP or anything. Never, ever did I see a person do that on an airplane. It was amazing.
That's very special. And your time, you mentioned the 747. So one of the things I always love to know is whether you worked on November 601BN, and apparently
I did.
You very much did.
I did. I mean, that along with the other models too, but I do remember, because I flew London quite a bit, they were all night flights. And I remember taking it upon myself because to repair the film, because we had projectors on the airplane, in the ceiling of the coach, or in the cabin, to show films for the passengers' entertainment. Not a digital thing, not a little box or something. We had projectors with those huge rolls that were up in the ceiling. And if the film broke or if it got off track, I didn't want to be doing a tap dance up and down the aisle for all night long. I thought, I need to figure out how to fix this film so we can get the passengers back out of my hair. So I did. I took it upon myself to figure out how to do that. So I'd pull that thing down out of the ceiling and kind of put it back on track or fix it however I could.
Hey, you were also IT repair, but that was also part of your job.
I was one of my jobs. I worked for a Fireman's Fund insurance company in the events department, and they introduced a new travel expense application to the 10,000 Fireman's Fund employees that were with them, and I was the database tester. That I got the job because I do kind of like techie stuff. So I had the job as database tester, and then I ended up, this was way back, this is in 2000 and 2000, 9/11 was, we lost everything. But it was right up to 9/11. And it was my job to train all of the traveling employees too. And it was one of the earliest online training sessions like Zoom that I had this manual that was about this thick, where I had to train, by the different travel offices around. I did some in-person training as well, but it was my job to train the district offices on how to operate and how to do the new database. Well, so I am kind of a techie person.
After dealing with so many thousands of passengers over the career. Yes. Speaking to people is definitely not going to be something that I've ever seen any flight attendant be shy about.
No, not at all. No, at all. The technical aspects of it were, a little daunting at first, but we had a good IT team at Fireman's Fund, so they'd get me set up and then I could go.
That's amazing. Well, you flew on November 601BN, and you had mentioned, some of your other flights and many other, models and liveries.
Right.
What were some of your other favorite Braniff airplanes?
Well, I flew the 727 a lot because I flew 12 years domestic, and a lot of it, out of Minneapolis. When I was there for 5 years in Minneapolis. So I flew out of there, and it was all 727 out of there, and so I mean that was our workhorse. That was my airplane, and so I knew every inch of that airplane that could be, and going back to the Vietnam stories, I remember flying an all-night flight up to Seattle, where it was half freight and half they'd put a freight cargo. The first class was split, and so that was all with cargo. And so I had to go this little narrow aisleway to get up to the cockpit to give the guys coffee or anything on the rollers. And then the second half, the coach cabin, from the galley back was all passengers. And it was almost exclusively military. It was almost these night flights. So that's, that was another, I just remember working with these, serving these guys and all night to Seattle. And that was their disembarkation point where they were on their way to Vietnam. They were very quiet flights.
You were some of the last moments of normality for them,
Yes.
And
which I try, and I just tried to keep a low profile. Sure. And serve them the best I could, and not get too emotional or anything else. I just knew that it was important to keep a stable atmosphere and just take the best care of them that I could. Yeah.
What were some of the fun moments you remember in your career? You had, visibility and access to so many different eras of Braniff. Yeah.
Exactly.
What were some of your favorite ad campaigns that you remember?
Well, I still use the term even today, if you've got it, flaunt it. That was my favorite, and it was such a perfect, and people say, and they didn't even blink. I said, that was one of the most important ad campaigns with my former airline. I have to tell stories wherever I go, so they all know that I used to fly for Braniff. So they said, I said, that's one of our favorites. And that was coined by Mary Wells. And so then I tell them the story about Mary Wells and how she was one of the first female advertising executives in New York. I watched every episode of Mad Men, and yeah, exactly. And I was just so impressed with it. I was of that era where when I first started flying, I had to sign paperwork that I had to quit when I was 32. We had to wear girdles, for God's sakes, under our culottes in the uniform, and false eyelashes, of course, and all that kind of stuff. And no men, no men were allowed either. So I was of the generation and activist. I was really strong advocate in the union. And I feel like I'm a contemporary of E. Jean Carroll, where, we were, I had the first ever Ms. Magazine issue. So I've been an advocate and a very staunch, political warrior for women since then. And today I'm like out of my skin. I'm so excited.
Yeah,
I don't want to get into politics, but no, I am really thrilled right now.
But you've led a life that has seen so much change and so much positivity.
Oh my God, yes.
We have regression and we have progression.
Yes.
And
yes.
it's in an era of progression.
Right.
I'm so happy to be speaking with you today. Do you have any final memories of Braniff that your time there that you want to share with us?
I just remember how we always got along so well, the crew, and my fellow flight attendants and the cockpit crew. I miss the camaraderie that we had. They were my social group. They were my friends. They were my working partners. They were, when Braniff went out of business, I lost everything. And it's taken me almost 40 years to even recover from that loss. It was so devastating.
Very impactful. Yeah.
So every opportunity I have, not so much at first, because I was really in pain so much, just watching all those airplanes come back into Dallas was heart-wrenching. And I was supposed to be on a Honolulu trip, and I had traded. So I was home, knowing that my fellow crew were over in Hawaii, and there were thunderstorms and really awful weather that night, if I recall. And I'm watching the weather reports, tornadoes and all kinds of stuff. And then I started hearing the reports that they're saying all the, Braniff airplanes are coming back. But, there's collection of airplanes that are coming into DFW. Mm-hmm. And and then I heard from my friends that, that their last and final trip was going to be coming back from Honolulu. And we all had luggage over there that we stored, our beach gear and stuff
Oh.
like that, that we could use for our layovers. And so the crew that was there, collected all of the stuff that we had left behind and brought it home on the last flight.
Wow.
That were my fellow crew members, So I mean, I have a lot of absolutely thrilling memories of it, and I also have these devastating, really intense visual memories of that whole experience.
Well, I'm excited you're going to come to the conference because number
Yeah.
one, the theme of the conference is "If you've got it, flaunt it." That is the
Oh,
tagline.
yeah, I know. I saw that. I thought, oh, cool. This is really good.
And secondly, I think you're going to get to come back and see what an amazing tribute it is that the amount of Braniff. We have a lot of former Braniff employees that come to the conferences. A lot of actually people who never flew for Braniff, never worked there, also
Yeah.
come to participate. But
Well, we're dying out.
the camaraderie,
I
though.
just had my 80th birthday this year.
No, congratulations. Well, that's great. The
Yeah. So this
camaraderie.
is a banner. This will be a banner event for me
Well,
to be able to participate.
you will see so many people and have the instant connection back because
Yeah.
I am always impressed at the level of connection that the Braniff folks have with each other still
Yeah.
to this day.
Yeah.
It's amazing. Well, Dee, I
I
want to
know.
thank you for your time spending with me today. I can't wait to see you at the conference coming up in September.
Yeah. Oh, I'm going to be flying in on the 11th. And
Okay.
so I'll be there, and I'm flying in on Southwest, so I can fly right into Love Field
That's right
from
by the
Oakland.
hotel.
It's like at 6. I'm leaving at like 5:30, 6 o'clock in the morning here. So I'll have to leave here like at 2:30 to get the bus to take me all the way over to Oakland, because I live in Sonoma County.
Yeah. Yep. We
So
were
it's
there
going to
not
be
long
quite a
ago.
long journey for me. And then I figured I'd kind of lay around the hotel the first day and then rent a car the second day, so I can drive around to all my old neighborhoods. That's what I want to visit, my places.
Well, I'm going to stop the recording. And Dee, I can't thank you enough for joining us today. And I look forward to seeing you in a couple months.
Oh, thank you. It's been fun. And I have a whole pile of stuff. I even have my menu from my hostess graduation.
Bring a few things with you. They're thin. They'll fit in your suitcase quite well.
Yeah, I know.